results from the Whitmer kidnapping case, as well as the first January 6th verdict, are in. Elon Musk is making a bold move as a Twitter shareholder. Meanwhile, the mainstream media suffered humiliation at the hands of college freshmen. What a weekend it was. But first, Miss Monica, how are you doing today?
Oh, first weekend in a while that we've been able to get out and about and enjoy the beautiful side of Michigan.
There is a beautiful side of Michigan.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw it. It was an atmospherical phenomenon. Doesn't happen very often, but Sunday, the sun came out. Oh my goodness, it was phenomenal.
And not just the reflection off of the snow.
Exactly. Not just the I look up, I'm blind, I look down, I'm blind. There's nowhere to look there. Oh no, it was a beautiful day. We had highs into, get this folks, the 60s. Fabulous. I tell you, man, April really is a blessed month for getting rid of things and moving things along.
Yes, turning things over, new leaf, and with Easter fast approaching,
yes,
we are ready for the jump into spring.
Very, very good. So as I said in the opening call, we have had, as a country, we have had some monster cases, or at least something that the mainstream media propped up and tried to make it into a monster case, and we've had a little bit of resolution on those. The interesting thing is, and we'll go into this a little more, is it's not only how the media propped them up, it's how politicians, including the big guy himself, came out, just like the Kyle Rittenhouse case, where, you remember that political ad where it was for Biden's campaign, where it showed white supremacist and showed Kyle Rittenhouse holding his gun?
And I believe that there are legal ramifications coming down the pipeline for that as well.
Oh boy, we will keep an eye on that. Yes, Mr. Rittenhouse has made it a point to talk about his, frankly, blatant cases of libel, slander. No matter how you want to look at it, they wronged him to the top, and he deserves justice on all fronts. But again, a story for another day. Today's story from the Daily Mail: a judge declares a mistrial for two of the men accused of trying to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. Other two defendants are cleared of charges. Before we go into this too much longer, background on this: I'm sure, as you all know, a couple years, we had this group supposedly plotting this entire time, plotting to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. The FBI infiltrates the group, and from what we heard in the mainstream media, they got the bad guys and got them on trial and saved Gretchen Whitmer, before she locked down the state and then tried to have her husband break those very rules to get his boat out on first. You know what? Let's not get off topic.
Well, the really funny part is that it's a marina owner close to us.
Yes.
That told him that he could not have his boat taken out.
Very clearly. Oh, I just realized I forgot to put on my news hat. Very clearly.
And also, we forgot to tell everybody, if you like what we do, make sure that you are hitting that subscribe button,
let's get that up
watching our videos,
it is a beautiful button.
Smashing that like.
Sure.
And we absolutely love the support that everyone gives us on this.
Absolutely. Love the support. We love that you guys love what we do because we love to do it. So feel free to show that support. We are, as you know, we're on Rumble primarily. We're also on YouTube if you want to venture that way. We've got podcasts all over, I believe, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio.
What's
the other one? There's plenty of options.
Lots of them out there. Just Google it.
Just Google it. Back to the story. So, the jury cleared Daniel Harris and Brandon Caserta of conspiracy to kidnap. They say they cannot reach a verdict for Adam Fox and Barry Croft Jr. I did read about this, and the reason I chose this article was, originally the announcement was two of them were acquitted. Two of them, there was a hung jury. And that was what I saw Friday. This is the resolution since then.
Well, and I believe in the article it mentions that the judge basically told them to go back and deliberate longer over what they...
The jury did go back together.
Now,
we will get to that.
I don't know... we were in North Carolina when all this went down. So it was, even though it was on the radar because we had family and connections to Michigan, it wasn't like a main priority for me to look into.
Oh, no.
So go over this again. So they were planning on... Well,
I'll tell you what. Let's read the article because it looks like it does cover it. If not, I can answer any questions you have because, tracking... I was very big into the 2020 election, really monitoring things and looking at the dirty tricks that they kept pulling. And, of course, this one was one of the big ones where... there's this evil MAGA conspiracy to take down Democrat politicians, activists, whatever. And the biggest, unfortunately, TLDR I've got for what we're going to talk about today is they blatantly lied, obviously, It was all just a giant smear campaign against President Trump in the moment, meant to make these people look better, and now the narrative is crumbling, but you can draw your own conclusions at the end of it. So anywho, the men all face the main charge of a kidnapping conspiracy. The other counts are related to explosives and a firearm. The men were arrested after an undercover FBI agent infiltrated their militia groups on Facebook. They offered the agent IOUs to buy explosives as part of the alleged ploy. I was about to say exclusive explosives from the FBI. Defense attorneys argued that the men were entrapped by the FBI. So, very interesting. A mistrial has been declared for 2 of the men accused of conspiring to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, and the other 2 have been acquitted. In a huge blow to the government and the FBI, none of the 4 men who were said to have planned to kidnap the Democratic governor in 2020 were convicted following a weeks-long federal trial in good old Grand Rapids, Michigan. The jury acquitted them, but could not reach a decision on the other 2 alleged ringleaders of the plot. A mistrial was declared on Friday afternoon by Judge Robert Jonker. Defensive attorneys, however, argued that the men were all victims of entrapment by the government and nothing would have ever happened to the Democratic governor, which I absolutely agree with. In a statement released after the verdict, Whitmer's chief of staff sent out a statement saying the Americans are, quote, are living through the normalization of political violence. Let's take a pause here real quick while we're talking about normalizing political violence. I don't seem to recall anyone in a red hat or with a certain trio of colors in their clothing burning down cities through the summer of love in 2020. I don't recall any red candidates or candidates who were even independent bailing them out and encouraging it to go on.
Let's look at this independently for what it is, though.
I understand that. It's just all projection with these people. When they say we're living through the normalization of political violence, they're talking about their political violence.
No, she's talking about anything that she can to put herself front and center and make herself the victim.
Well, of course, you declare the other side of what you are doing while you are doing it. This is Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. This is basic stuff, and it's just getting more blatant, but we'll go on with it. The plot to kidnap and kill a governor may seem like an anomaly, but we must be honest about what it really is, the result of violent, divisive rhetoric that is all too common across the country. There must be accountability and consequences for those who commit heinous crimes. Without accountability, extremists will be emboldened. I 100% agree. When Maxine Waters tells her followers to get in Republicans' faces, make them uncomfortable, kick them out, this is the result of it. Or at least, this is what they perceive to be the result of it. Because when you start inventing boogeymen and putting up monsters, even if they're made of cardboard all around you, you'll start to see monsters everywhere. And so, I do think what you're saying is right, that this isn't, oh boy. You know what, I'm just going to pause my rant real quick and just say, just looking at these pictures, never judge a book by its cover. These men are all innocent. These pictures, they could have done a little better, but that's okay.
They could have done a little better. I mean, these mugshots are horrifying.
These are the kind of mugshots you expect to see in these situations.
Well, and here's so it doesn't specifically say anywhere in here that they were MAGA supporters.
Right? It's the group that they were a part of, which we'll see if we get to it. It says they all disliked her because of her strict COVID-19 regulations, but the men also expressed disdain for the government in general. I'd agree. Earlier on Friday, U.S. District Judge Robert Jonker ordered the jury to continue with deliberations after they claimed they could not reach a decision for any of the men. I'd like you to go back and make another effort to see if you can come to an agreement on the issues that you're stuck on. If you can't, you can't, he said. The jury is considering 10 charges in the case. Blah, blah, blah. Deliberations resumed Friday with a court employee handing over a large plastic bag known as Exhibit 291. The pennies were requested before jurors went home Thursday.
What does that mean? Pennies taped to a commercial-grade firework were intended to act like shrapnel, investigators said.
According to evidence, a homemade explosive was detonated during training in September 2020, about a month before the men were arrested. In his closing argument on April 1st, appropriate, Assistant U.S. Attorney Niels Kessler said Croft wanted to test the explosive as a possible weapon to use against Whitmer's security team. He quoted him as saying the pennies would be so hot they could go right through your skin. I mean, in all fairness, that does kind of sound like the kind of bomb a country boy would make. But anyways.
I mean, it sounds like somebody who has played way too much video games and thinks that the world works.
Oh, I see. You mean the thing that they accuse people who play video games of becoming more violent. That was a very big talking point.
No. The people who actually have a gun culture understand how guns work. It sounds like these people who I mean, to the best of my ability, they seem uneducated, and they seem like they were a ragtag bunch of people who were turned into extremists by someone egging them on.
Well, of course they were being egged on. They were infiltrated by the FBI. The FBI essentially, well, I mean, let's continue into this. So prosecutors offered testimony from undercover agents, a crucial informant, and 2 men who pleaded guilty to the plot. Jurors also read and heard secretly recorded conversations, violent social media posts, and chat messages. Prosecutors said the group was steeped in anti-government extremism and angry over Whitmer's COVID-19 restrictions. Joined the club. Defense lawyers, however, said any scheme was the creation of government agents who were embedded in the group and manipulated the men. Whitmer rarely talks about the plot, though she referred to blah, blah, blah. She has blamed former President Donald Trump for fomenting anger over coronavirus restrictions and refusing to condemn right-wing extremists like those charged in the case. Wrong. How undercover agents infiltrated militia group the Wolverine Watchmen to try to take down Gretchen Whitmer's quote-unquote kidnappers, IOUs for grenades, incriminating text, blah, blah, blah. So, basically, we have, and we can go down to this, where it tells the story about how these guys infiltrated, but essentially, you just had a group of guys, the Wolverine Watchmen. Basically, just a group of guys had a club. They met up, like you said, they drank, they talked about gun culture, they were anti-government because, of course, the government's become increasingly tyrannical over the last 2 years. So it's an opportunity to vent. The FBI agents kind of found this out. They infiltrated the group. They egged them on until they were able to completely entrap them. It's basically how this whole story goes. And now that it's been essentially discovered, or not discovered, reinforced with a judgment saying, this is, well, okay. Tell you what, before we go into my opinion, from the bottom of it, we've got, posing it as a man called Red, Bates, who is the FBI agent, Tim Bates, plotted with the group on how they were going to snatch Whitmer. Defense attorneys argued entrapment, claiming that if he hadn't been involved, the plot would never have been developed, much less come to fruition. They said it was nothing but, quote, stone talk, that the government turned into a real conspiracy. Schweers and Bates both testified as trial. Schweers is Mark Schweers, the other FBI undercover agent. Just context.
Happened to be there?
Just context, because it just says Schweers and Bates both testified. Schweers told how one of the group told him that he wanted to tie Whitmer, who he called the tyrant, to a table and pose for a photo with her like they had performed the biggest drug bust. Again, words are words. He's allowed to have these opinions, but of course, you're saying this to an FBI agent who's looking for a reason to arrest you. Yeah. But also, again, this is your club. You allowed this guy in, and all you're doing is shooting nonsense with your friends, venting about your frustrations.
It becomes not nonsense when they commit money to it, commit action to it, commit training to it. So obviously, these guys have these thoughts and are slightly unhinged. There's an extremist on both sides of this.
I would challenge the definition of extremist. I would say, if anything, so far, I haven't read anything here that has led me to believe there's anything other than very frustrated populists venting to whom they think are their peers, and venting is okay. But
venting is okay, yes. But when you purchase items or tell someone, hey, go ahead and get these explosives for me. It doesn't matter if that person's an FBI agent or not. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't be actively trying to get stuff like that to carry out any type of action. It's one thing to say, I'm frustrated and I'm going to vent and I'm going to say all of these ridiculous things. It's another when you actually start putting that into motion.
Oh, yes, I agree, unless the individuals who allowed you to put it into motion were entrapping you as agents of the government, which the defense attorney brought up a great point. Would these events have transpired without being egged on? But we will go on with it. So listen to this. The other agent, Tim Bates, convinced the group to give him IOUs to get $4,000 of explosive that was needed to carry out the plot. He said it was his job to ensure the group did not actually go out and buy. So before we get into...
that's the problem.
Exactly.
Right there.
Before we get into the next segment here, you are 100% correct, and it is very important not to fall into a radical mindset where you are going to do these kinds of crazy things. However, up until these FBI agents entered the picture, you just had a bunch of guys hanging out in their club venting about how much they hated the government.
And had they gone out of their own volition and purchased explosives... that's where, like I said, they're taking action.
Of course. I
But
agree.
the fact that he says, "Oh, well, give me an IOU and I'm going to get it for you," no.
See, that's
I'm
a
sorry.
situation
That's
where
where we have to stop the law
Yes.
enforcement from trying to create a reason for their jobs.
Yep. It'd been an entirely different situation if it was like the FBI agent walks in, he's like, I've infiltrated the group, sir. Okay, we'll go mingle. Let's see what they have to
Yes.
say. And the guy was like, look at this giant explosives cache we have built and assembled. We're going to take Whitmer down. Okay, we have found a terrorist cell. Let's move in. However, and this is my we'll get into this a little more with the next story, but this is my growing disdain for the FBI, the CIA, the DIJ, all of these alphabet organizations that are apparently just the military wing of the Democrat Party. And when I say, again, Democrat Party, I mean the Uniparty. Obviously, we got Collins, Murkowski, and Romney blatantly jumping ship to the other side. The Uniparty has basically taken over these institutions, and this is a perfect sign of like, we need a story, we need something, we need to show that these common men are terrorists so we can paint them as terrorists. So what happens? Like you said, maybe they said something like, it'd be pretty cool if we could get some explosives, and this guy goes, well, I could get some if you would give me an IOU written with your signature and preferably the date. That would be great too. Oh yeah, sure, dude, here you go. I'll get these explosives. Yeah, that's called entrapment, Tom.
Well, and so the FBI, the CIA, all of these agencies, they're linked to all of our politicians. It's all become this corrupt, my hand in your hand.
I know exactly what you're describing, and it can be summed up in 2 words. And these are 2 words that we've heard a lot over the last 5 years. Deep state. Now, when I say deep state, we're not talking about some mustache-twirling cabal of evil villains bent on taking over the world. What we are talking about is unelected bureaucrats who were either put in position or promoted to a position, but they are carrying out marching orders from whomever, but not on behalf of the people. We didn't vote these people in. They were nominated, they were nominated by whomever, previous presidents, whatever, and they've just been there. And yet they're allowed to dictate. The best example I can think of course, is Fauci, who has, of course, somehow crawled back into the corner of the newsreel. We're not going to touch on him. Just the fact that this guy's been around for this long, dictating policy and getting paid more than the president of the United States. No one elected this guy. He doesn't represent the people. Just like these organizations no longer represent the people. They represent whomever is pulling their strings. So the deep state is real. However, it's not some crazy conspiracy. It's literally just somebody, it doesn't matter if it's Obama, if it's Bush, anyone, a president puts these people in position and they stay there. And their ideologies stay there too.
Well, the whole idea of when you say deep state, a lot of people start to think, oh my gosh, it's QAnon, it's a conspiracy.
Well, that's why I took a moment to really show that we're not talking about giant conspiracy theories. We're talking about unelected bureaucrats.
But it's not even just that. It's the fact that we are all under the assumption that everything in our government works with checks and balances.
It's the way it's supposed to be.
But not everything was set up with checks and balances.
Well, no, everything.
And
modifications
that's the problem.
came later. Exactly. Yes.
So we need to make sure that we go back and take a good look at why people are being hired in positions and have a third party assess it. We don't need to have this FBI agent, okay, they're investigating a plot, which is what the FBI should be doing. They should be looking into all credible threats.
Exactly.
But when they're creating a threat so that they can be more relevant, so that they can bring it to the news front, and they start to become these almost celebrities for foiling all of these plots.
Of course. It's main character syndrome again.
Exactly. And now it's happening to our law enforcement.
Oh, it happened a long time ago. I mean, people don't realize that when they said defund the police and they wanted to get rid of all these cops, all the cops that were, I'm not going to say, well, it's a sweeping generalization. A majority of the cops who were actually there to do the great good that they had set out to do left at that point. Because they said, if you don't want us, we're not going to do it. We understand your movement. This is the will of the people, yada, yada, yada. We're moving on. So what do we have left when the good cops leave? That's the problem. And unfortunately, like you said, with these agencies, they're really just, at this point, they're really just the arm of the Uniparty. We've seen the DOJ go after parents. We've seen the FBI go after pretty much the common man. We've seen the CIA doing it too. I mean, it is everywhere. They're never investigating what needs to be investigated. They're only going after I don't know, pull ropes in garages, for example. But I do think I am going to hop to the next story. It's still on the same.
Which we will have to come back around to another day
yes.
because there's a story behind that I want to cover with you.
Oh, yes. Story for another day. From the Gateway Pundit, there's more to yesterday's verdicts in the Michigan Whitmer kidnapping case. Much more. Oh, boy. Sorry, fellas. You guys are all innocent, and I'll stand by you, but, man... Look at those pictures.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you remember when George Zimmerman was big in the news and they took like the worst possible picture of him and changed the lighting on it and changed the filters on it to make him look like he was a different race.
Well, that's what they do with everything.
I understand.
That's like what they did with Leah Thompson, or...
Oh, yeah, that's right. You showed me that.
Yes, they modified the picture to make the trans swimmer look more feminine.
Yep, look more feminine. They actually
changed the lighting and did a filter
over this dude's face to make him look more feminine. Oh, my God.
Because that's what we try to do. Instead of reporting an unbiased
it's propaganda.
Opinion on something, they try to spin it and try to lean you one way, which is exactly why and even some of the stuff that we read, that's why we read from both sides, is because so much of it is written in a way to make you sympathetic to one side or the other.
No, absolutely. So it says the Governor Whitmer case, the Governor Whitmer kidnapping case, which we now know was comprised of virtually all FBI agents and informants, took another devastating hit in August. Michael Hills, an attorney, one of the 6 defendants, produced text messages showing an FBI field agent telling an informant to lie, frame an innocent man, and then delete the text messages.
Yeah.
This is why federal prosecutors are refusing to hand over text messages and laptops from FBI informants in the Whitmer kidnapping case. The FBI actually hatched the plot, paid for the plot, ran the plot, and set up innocent men in their immoral scheme. The FBI's top informant behind the kidnapping scam was later arrested after he beat his wife following a swingers party. That's not really relevant.
What? I mean,
there's an article there.
It's not relevant.
I could click on it. Following a swingers party. Are you noticing a common theme?
Maybe.
Okay, anywho. We now know that...
he might have been one of the people that
Madison Cawthorn was talking about.
Madison, there's a link to a party invite. Don't click it.
Let's take a look at this. Yeah, I'm going to leave that one blue for now. So we now know that the not guilty verdicts came despite the judge not allowing much of the evidence that would exonerate those charged. For example, we now know that the 6 defense witnesses weren't allowed to testify. In addition, shenanigans by the FBI were never admitted into the trial. Despite this, the jury saw through this for what it was, a setup by the FBI on innocent Americans. And they even have where BuzzFeed, which is about as far left as you can get, reported on it. And even they had to admit it. It says, both before and during the trial, prosecutors went to extraordinary lengths to exclude evidence and witnesses that might undermine their arguments, while winning the right to bring in almost anything favorable to their own side. As a result, defense attorneys were largely reduced to nibbling at the edges of the government's case in hopes of instilling doubt in the jurors' minds and making claims about official misconduct with vanishingly few pieces of evidence to support them.
Well, and of course that's what they want to do, because as a judge and as somebody in a political office, which they are, if you see a plot against another government official, you're going to perceive that as a threat to yourself.
Well, of course. You wouldn't want your agency looking absolutely incompetent or worse, evil for setting up an entire plot.
Exactly.
An entire plot that they touted around the media like, look at these evil, I mean, at the time they did spin them as MAGA supporters, like back in 2020.
No, I remember that. Yeah. I remember that. I noticed now they've leaned off of it.
I noticed that too. I was just going to say, you see, none of those keywords were in there.
Yeah, well, of course, because at the time, it was, we're going to put this out there and make Trump look bad.
Yep, it was all about winning that election. Interestingly enough, we have a flashback here. Joe Biden blamed Trump for the Whitmer kidnapping plot that ended in 0 guilty verdicts on Friday. God, look at that confused old bum. The governor of Whitmer kidnapped, blah, 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 blah. Okay, here we go. In October 2020, nope, sorry. The FBI became aware of the plot through discussions on social media in early 2020, yada, yada, yada. Joe Biden attacked Trump and blamed him for the so-called plot to kidnap and kill Gretchen Whitmer in a speech in Michigan in October 2020. Biden said Trump's, quote, "Liberate Michigan" tweet from April 2020 summoned the domestic terrorist. Summoned the domestic terrorist. I'm not going to play this clip because he says, I mean, he incoherently babbles, I'll say, that President Trump tweeting, quote, "Liberate Michigan" was the call that was heard for the people who were arrested by the FBI for trying to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And of course,
it couldn't possibly be that he wanted people in Michigan to actually vote the way that they believed things should be run. Well, when he says
liberate Michigan, we weren't here at the time, but Michigan was one of those states like locked down. Yeah. They couldn't do anything. When he said liberate Michigan, he
Michigan's
meant from
been locked in blue for years.
Control, yes.
That's why who was the guy that we watched the video with the polar bear that dropped on the car? You know what I'm talking about?
The polar bear from Lost.
Yes, and it was all about Detroit. And how it was the Democratic-run city and the policies that had
no one talks about
that
Detroit.
hindered it. What was his name?
I don't know, but it's really interesting. I love.
He also did the one on Eat the Rich.
Oh yeah. Bill Whittle.
Yes, that's it.
All right,
Bill Whittle. And absolutely loved his videos. If you get a chance, and if I can look them up, I'll link them below.
Sure.
But the thought that they were really truly scared for the first time in how long? 20, 30 years, Michigan might turn red.
Oh, it did in 2016.
That's what I'm saying. Like, they're really, really terrified that, and not just leaning red, slightly purple. Like, they're really scared.
Oh yeah.
That because so many Trump, I mean, look at where we live. We drive down the road and see how many Trump signs still.
Oh wow, the flags are flying everywhere. You can't drive in a direction without seeing them, and it is a thing of beauty. It really is. And I mean, the big thing about, Detroit, anyone who talks about how terrible New York is or how terrible the West Coast is because it's run by Democrats, they never talk about the elephant in the room, and that is Detroit. I have seen comparisons of Detroit to Hiroshima. Because in the same span of time as getting an atomic bomb dropped on their city, they were able to rebuild and make a bustling, amazing city. And Detroit has not changed. Detroit has been under Democrat rule the last century, and shining spots excluded, it is just a massive dumpster fire.
Well, and a big part of that is the unionization, which Democrats are famous for wanting to push unions. And then you see, like, the United Auto Workers. Detroit is one of the only major metropolitan areas that doesn't have a rail system, a subway system, anything like that. They want to push individual cars because that's where cars are made.
I'm saying no one... Who even drives there? I mean, when's the last time you saw traffic in Detroit, honestly?
Well, there's a lot of traffic.
Okay, fair enough. I guess I meant vehicular traffic, not any other kind of traffic.
Well, who drives in Michigan now? I mean, we all disappear down the potholes.
This is true. We disappear down the potholes, and we'd fix them, but we're too busy paying for gas, so yeah.
And our new... Welcome Center, which is being delayed because of COVID backups.
Oh, boy.
Supply chain issues.
Fabulous.
That we've spent millions of dollars on because we want them to see this great Welcome Center into the state of Michigan and then disappear down a pothole.
Yeah. There's a reason why traffic cones are called the Michigan state flag. However...
State flower,
sorry.
Because they pop up in the spring and they're there all summer.
They're all summer. The Michigan state flower. Beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. But, I guess the big thing, and we're going to hop to our next story, which of course is tied into this whole thing as well, is number one, do not believe anything the mainstream media says, ever. If you ever see something and you're like, oh, harumph, that looks just outrageous, probably give it I used to say give it a week, but these days give it about 48 hours.
Well, and more than not, look up both extreme sides. So if you're a Fox News person, look and see what CNN's saying about it. And then if you're a CNN person, look and see what Fox News is saying about it. Research and look into alternate forms.
Absolutely.
That's why we do what we do, is because we've got... I mean, we go through, and you'll see CNN articles on here. You'll see the Gateway Pundit. You'll see Politico. You'll see...
Oh, yeah, we try to hit everybody. Our next article we're about to dive into comes from CBS.
Yeah.
I mean, you really just have to let go of the programming because they've spent years programming people, telling them, CNN says nothing but Fox News is terrible and brainwashes people. Meanwhile, they're brainwashing people. You see, I mean, it's nonstop. Now, I am not a defender of Fox News with the exception of Tucker Carlson. I think it's 100% controlled opposition by the Uniparty. I think all the mainstream news is garbage. let me remind you, 2020 election, Fox News called Arizona before anyone else for Biden, before the counting had even stopped.
See, and I don't even see it like that. I just see it as these news broadcasters are being paid.
Yeah.
You know, they are being paid by advertisers. They're being paid by, you know, all kinds of stuff just to get them to sway people's opinions. So it's not that they're trying to just inform you. Mm-hmm. They're trying to swing you one way or another. It's an advertisement.
It's propaganda.
Every article is an advertisement.
It is. It's advertisement, but strictly speaking, it's propaganda. And back to that number 2 point I was going to make, these days especially, the government is not your friend. Brings us to our next article from CBS News. Matthew Martin becomes the first January 6th defendant to be found not guilty on all charges. January 6th. Despite what happened in the Summer of Love, this moment of which people were allowed to walk into the Capitol by police and walked around, basically bumbled around, staying, in the most hilarious of the videos, staying between the velvet ropes as they walked.
Yes.
Sure, bad things happened that day. There's a lot of speculation as to who was behind it. We don't know because crazy Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser, who's the mayor of D.C., are refusing to release any body cam footage, any video footage, anything. So right now, all we have is the picture painted by on-the-ground footage and the mainstream media nonsense where, of course, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to our country and the reason why we need all of these new security provisions and to crack down on this and that and that. It's an excuse. It's propaganda. And now we have our first official development, or I should say our first official step in the correct direction.
Well, and I think some of the people looking at this and AOC is one of the people that comes to mind because she wasn't even anywhere connected to this. And she was in her office, which is not in the Capitol building.
Nope.
And
yeah, even she had to milk it.
Yes.
Yep. Even she had to make up, I'm going to say it again, fabricate a story about how she was scared and they were coming for her and all these things. And then it was established through a timeline. Not only did it not happen anywhere near when the fireworks were actually going, but it had nothing to do with you. Like you said, she wasn't even in the building.
Well, and that's the thing. They want you to speak out if you have the same opinion as them. They do not want you to speak out if you're disgruntled by any of their policies.
Of course. It's all about maintaining the echo chamber, maintaining the propaganda and the message. A judge on Wednesday found Matthew Martin of Santa Fe, New Mexico, not guilty of multiple misdemeanor counts related to the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, which, of course, even then, they're calling it an attack. Martin is the first person charged in connection to the attack who has been acquitted on all charges. Let me close that real quick. Martin, the first January 6th defendant to take the stand at his own defense, admitted to being inside the Capitol on January 6th. He testified before Judge Trevor McFadden that after briefly attending former President Trump's rally, he went back to his hotel. He then returned to the Capitol for what he thought would be another rally and said he was, quote, let in by police, claiming he didn't notice any security barrier. Martin testified that he entered the Capitol building, made his way through the rotunda, and left. Martin's movements on January 6th were documented using CCTV footage from inside the Capitol and data, including video from his own cell phone. Martin was not charged in connection with any of the violence seen on January 6th and was not found to be a member of any extremist groups. Basically, he testified that he was in his hotel. He had text messages with his supervisor from work talking about how great the experience was. He said he didn't tell the boss about his entry into the Capitol because he said she would disagree with his decision and he didn't want her to read too far into his messages. He did, however, text her not as much security as you'd think, and they were not prepared. Again, when this all started to go down, I'm going to remind everybody, President Trump called Muriel Bowser and called Nancy Pelosi and said, we should get the National Guard down there. Something's going on. It's getting a little rowdy.
But they were warned ahead of time to bring in more Capitol Police, and they decided not to.
What happened to the story of the night before when there were pipe bombs supposedly found? You remember that? There was a video of somebody dropping off pipe bombs and pallets of bricks. Another throwback to the Summer of Love. Pallets of bricks randomly appeared at these towns where the riots were. And there was a video footage of one guy, and they were like, if you have any information about this person, yada, yada. I remember seeing that, and yet, poof, which I don't want to put on the tinfoil sombrero, but kind of makes me think they knew who the guy was, and it went down the memory hole because he might have been linked to a certain three-letter agency. But, again, that is speculation because the entire thing got memory holed. You would think somebody laying pipe bombs the day before a presidential rally would be worth staying in the news cycle, but apparently it is not.
Well, and I believe it was that they found it in Republican strongholds. Isn't that right?
Yes. Actually, I'm not going to commit entirely because, like I said, that story lasted for about a 24-hour news cycle, and we haven't heard anything since. But from what I remember, I think so. But I would
think that the pipe bomb would be more of a credible threat than a crowd of people who...
You would think.
And granted, we weren't there.
Nope. I wanted to be there. We were close.
We were almost there.
Yeah, but we ended up, it just didn't work out, so I just watched from home and worked. I remember I had it up on the big screen, and I was watching the live feed, and I mean, I'm not going to lie, I kind of thought it was, up until it got rowdy, I was just like, that's a thing of beauty. Look at all that peaceful protesting. Yep. That's how you do it. You go, you wave your flag, you sit on the stairs. You don't burn the city down. I would say compare the pictures of January 6th to the George Floyd riots just the year before in the same area. If you look at it, you can literally see, and maybe I should just bring up the picture. You could literally see smoke, fire. They were lighting things on fire, burning things down, and just destroying anything they came into contact with. You compare it to January 6th, and no matter what footage you look at, no matter how rowdy it gets, it does not compare. It just doesn't. And the fact that they were trying to memory hold not only their involvement in the Summer of Love and the George Floyd riots, but their encouragement of it and trying to make all the focus on this is...
Well, and that's the thing, is the longer that they hold January 6th, what are they calling them?
Yes, Liz Cheney,
offenders.
The January 6th.
As long as they hold them.
As they're
held
in solitary confinement.
That's what I'm saying.
No medical.
They have to start processing this. They have to start moving this forward. Because so far, the only thing that the Democratic Party has done is hold it over everyone's head and say, yep, January 6th, and wag their finger. Yep. They haven't looked into it deeply. They haven't investigated. They haven't tried anybody until now. This is the first defendant. Exactly. And to be found not guilty on all charges for the first one, good. Let's set the precedence that the people who were not involved with any violent actions and who were just at the Capitol, okay, if they stepped outside of your imaginary lines, then okay, that sucks. But when you go to a museum, if you get pushed out of the little walkway, then they're not going to charge you with trespassing.
I mean, this exact same area, if you remember during the Kavanaugh hearing, they stormed into this area to have their sit-in and shout and banged on the doors.
No, I remember that.
Remember that? And yet, was that an insurrection? Of course not. Because
nobody was arrested for that.
Nobody was arrested. Nope. They just said, "Oh yeah, they're right to peaceful protest because they're on our side," and that just goes to show you.
Well, no, that was more because our side is willing to be forgiving and accepting of course, those behaviors.
It really does make you wonder, and this takes you to a very dark place when you really think about it, but. If tolerance gets you so far, at what point do you say tolerance has gone far enough, it's time for intolerance? But that is a slippery slope that I don't want to say out loud. But man, You're right.
I think we're at that point.
I think so too. Tolerance is something that we have always maintained because it's about being the adults. And oddly enough, Mr. Bo Jiden, who was getting the adults back in charge, has done nothing but further sow division, and pretty much destroy every aspect of our country, leading to more extremism. But anywho, in his ruling, McFadden cited Martin's demeanor while inside the Capitol, noting that he did not appear to be screaming or crowding anybody. McFadden also referenced video indicating police didn't physically block Martin as he entered the building, and one even appeared to possibly be waving him inside. McFadden said it was a close call on the charge of entering a restricted building. Agreeing that Martin entered the Capitol, but said in his ruling that intent was key. Martin was formerly an engineer, blah, blah, blah. We don't care about that one. I mean, the big thing here is, you can find video evidence if you look hard enough, because a lot of it has been memory hold. They let these people in. They told them, hey, I may not agree with you, but I agree with your right to protest. Some cops took selfies with these people. Mm-hmm. Now, there was violence. I'm not going to not denounce the violence because it should be denounced.
Every time these two sides clash, there's violence.
Exactly, but that's just it. There is actually evidence, and it would not surprise me, but there is actually evidence that there were Antifa, Black Lives Matter supporters there in MAGA gear trying to stir up physical violence. But of course, we can't know that because they won't release the evidence related to the case, which of course should just make you go, well, that's even more suspicious. But we cannot make a judgment until we see everything. However, at least the precedent has been set. For most of these people, they did nothing wrong.
Well, so here's the bigger thing. You look at this, and you look at the trials, and you look at what they're trying to do with all of the January 6 people. They got a hold of, was it Tucker Carlson's text messages?
Oh, yeah.
Alex Jones' text messages?
Yep.
It's not that they don't have this information.
Nope.
It's that they cannot charge with the information they have.
Exactly. They can't release you. All they can do, and they just did this to Ivanka Trump the other day too, the January 6th committee, all they can do is bring you in and grill you. I think they kept her in there for 8 hours, hoping you'll entrap yourself. And so far, they haven't gotten anybody.
Well, no, they want public sentiment to turn against you. Yes. By saying that they brought you in for questioning, they're already tarnishing you.
Yes, but the narrative is already crumbling. People don't care anymore. In fact, people look at Kinzinger and Cheney, who have the lowest approval ratings ever. Although, you know what? Yeah, everybody knows I hate Liz Cheney, and everybody should hate Liz Cheney. I did see an article that said she was actually out fundraising her MAGA opponent. Don't be discouraged. Do you know who's fundraising Liz Cheney? Mitch McConnell. We got to get rid of all of them.
That's the turtle dude, right?
The turtle dude, that's right. The guy who came out and said, if I'm made the majority speaker, I'm going to reel Joe Biden in. How about you impeach him, you investigate his entire administration, and we get rid of all of them? Because you won't, because you're a part of it. Get rid of Mitch McConnell.
And by sitting there and saying that the Republicans will make him a moderate.
That's what he says. That's the thing. Republicans, or at least this uniparty wing, they're nothing but Democrats doing the speed limit.
Well, no, they're just trying to spin it. They're trying to figure out a way to keep Joe Biden in office and looking halfway decent for the people who are sticking with him. So, i.e. the really true extremists on the left are the only ones supporting Biden right now. We can see that in his numbers.
Even they don't support him. Oh, well, I guess when you say extremist, I think liberal extremist, you're literally talking about the Democrat, we hit the D or die, essentially. Right?
Exactly.
Okay, I see.
Exactly. Like, look at his numbers.
Yep.
He's down to approval ratings, what, in the 30s?
It's the worst. If the official approval rating, yes. The unofficial approval rating is, I think it's in low teens.
Yeah, so he's at the point where he's got to win back moderates somehow. He can't do it on his own record.
Well, of course.
Because he's already come out so staunchly for these very extreme policies.
Not to mention he's already hit their pocketbooks. You can't start with the pocketbook hit. You have to start with the moderate, we're going to do this, this, and this, and then slowly wean into that. But it's like they're aware. They know that the public sentiment is against them, so they're just trying to mash through as much garbage as they can before they're kicked out of the club. And it's coming.
Yeah.
They know it's coming.
They can't swing this back because so many people are saying absolutely not.
Well, of course not. You can't swing it back when you
But
start
there's a lot
with
of
the
people who
pocketbooks.
still don't want Trump.
See, that's
Just for the sake that he is Trump. It's not necessarily based on any of his policies, because if you look into his policies, I think a lot of my friends who are anti-Trump would actually agree with them if they didn't know that it was coming from him.
Yeah, Mark Dice did a great video series where he took all of Trump's policies and he just went out on the streets and talked to people and said, hey, are you in favor of Joe Biden and these policies? And they're like, yeah, those are great. And he goes, oh, yeah? They're actually President Trump's policy. And a handful of them went, oh, well, actually, I better look into that. And he goes, oh, come on.
Well, and the bigger thing is the way that they frame it. A lot of times when the Democrats frame up their policies, the headline reads great for exactly what they want. But when you read the text behind it, when you read the body of the legislature that they're putting through, it's not what the title would make you think.
No.
Freedom of Information Act?
Yeah, right. Don't get me started. The Affordable Health Care.
The Affordable Care
Act.
Yeah.
Yeah. And remember when he said, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor? It's just lies. It's blatant lies. I mean, everything.
Okay, I can understand you run on that policy and then you have to change it. Well, then change the name of what you're actually changing to tell people what it is. But then on top of that, you have... like, the way that they frame things to me is just so funny. Like, Joe Biden jumping on the Build Back Better idea.
It's just propaganda.
Well, okay,
Non-stop.
Make America Great Again is propaganda. You know, you put it out there, that's a statement that you want to spin. Yeah. But if you compare it to Build Back Better, you can't build back unless you tear something down. He was telling us ahead of time that he's planning on tearing all of this down.
Say what you will about that senile old groomer, but at the same time, he's been very transparent. He said, day one, I'm going to shut down Keystone. He said, day one, I'm going to make a push for electronic vehicles. And, those poor moderate Democrats who are used to hearing this kind of stuff and being like, I'm sure he'll get to that in like year 2 or 3, and, we'll just go from there. They're used to that's how the game is played, but no. He came in and he just destroyed so many aspects of the economy, so many aspects that have been development. There's a situation that politicians used to know and understand, and that is you go for the pocketbook last. You are very subtle about it, because no matter how you felt about President Trump, no matter how you felt about him personally, the media, 24/7, every negative thing they could spin, he carried on with his agenda. In 2019, we had the best economy in our country, the lowest unemployment rates. Everything was amazing, and there's not a person out there who can go, you know what? I actually think that 2022 is better than 2019. Wrong. It's been a straight course downhill ever since the uniparty took back control, because let's be honest, Joe Biden isn't doing anything. That guy ain't all there. He's a puppet.
Well, I mean, he's a puppet, but he's making some very significant moves, like our next article.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not even going to... This is just an update, folks. We told you we'd keep an eye on it, and the vote is in. Here you go. The Senate confirmed Ketanji Brown Jackson, sending a clear message from Collins, Murkowski, and Mitt Romney that they are okay with lighter sentences for people who do unnameable things against children. They are cool with that. They're cool with all of it, and now this is what you get. This is where checkboxes get you. Biden came out and he said, I am going to nominate a Supreme Court justice with this checkbox and this checkbox, and by gum, I did it. And then
it's funny how he doesn't mention it.
What is a woman? And she couldn't define it, but it's so important that there's a woman in this role, even though we cannot define what a woman is. It's insanity. And now we have to deal with this individual on the U.S. Supreme Court, her insane rulings related to terrorism and pedophilia, I don't know, child endangerment. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't look into the details because it's getting sick. And a lot of these people that she released on dramatically and drastically lower sentences have been rearrested for similar crimes. This individual is now in the U.S. Supreme Court. However, just a little pinch of hopium for you, a little bit of white pills so that you don't feel too discouraged. As Monica pointed out, we were talking about this last week, it doesn't actually change the majority that conservatives have. As long as they stick together, I'm looking at you, Kavanaugh, Comey Barrett, for some reason, keep on hopping ship. As long as they stay together, this lady's insanity shouldn't do anything more than the last, I'm forgetting his name, the guy that's retiring.
It says it in here. Hold on.
It doesn't tip the scales.
Breyer.
Thank you, Justice Breyer. It doesn't tip the scales because there is still a conservative majority, so her being there hopefully won't make an impact, but really it's the impact of how she got there. It wasn't about her record, which we saw was garbage. It was about checkbox, vote, or you are against checkboxes. You're an istophobe.
Well, and here's my big issue with this. Okay, I get it.
Yep.
They wanted to nominate a black female.
Yes. Heaven forbid we vet these people.
Well, so if a black transgender judge stepped up and said that someone who was previously a he wanted to switch to being a female, would that meet their checkbox?
Well, I mean, Rachel Levine was the Woman of the Year despite spending the first 54 years of his life as a man.
Exactly. And then on top of it, well, if someone who is biracial decides to identify as African American, does that meet their checkmark?
Well, Sean King, born white, very Irish, very white, but now claims he's black and has for the last 5 or 6 years is still getting...
Is that Talcum X?
It is Talcum X,
okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I always have a hard time remembering.
Martin Luther Cream, yes.
Yes.
Yes, he's got nicknames up the wazoo, but the point is, I mean, he's born and raised a white dude, Irish descent. You can look at his family, you can look at his siblings, you can look at everything, and yet he claims he's black and the community has accepted him because he spouts this kind of nonsense. I say that, I don't know, I haven't heard from him in a while. Maybe finally he went the Rachel Dolezal path and they just were like, hey, wait a minute. No, you're not, and kicked him out.
Well, and here's the bigger thing. Like,
I doubt it, though.
Why are we leaning on someone's political insight for a position that is supposed to be impartial. I understand. We all want something in line with our beliefs, with our standards, with what, but Supreme Court judges should not be conservative and they shouldn't be liberal.
No, the only thing that they should lean on, and it used to be their job, is the Constitution.
Absolutely.
That is the only thing that they should all have in common, is a deep respect and knowledge of the Constitution and how to interpret modern-day law based on what the Founding Fathers intended.
So both sides need to stop it with the back and forth. The Supreme Court should be middle of the road. It should be above reproach when it's talking about leaning one way or another. The system is broken.
Yes. Well, tragically, we've been finding that out the last couple of years.
There has to be a way to fix it because check marks aren't working.
Well, check marks will never work.
Going through forced conservatism and making someone believe what you believe isn't working.
Well, no.
Both sides need to come back and be impartial and start to see it from the other side's point of view.
You know what? That is a very interesting thing, and actually that does segue into an article that we have, but that article is like 2 forward. So you know what? I'm going to hop 2 forward because we've got something real interesting here. We'll come back. We'll end on the one that we were going to do a second ago, but let's see here. You sent me this article, and I'm actually, originally, you and I talked about doing the one that I had before this, but I really like where you were going with that, and I kind of want, like I said, I kind of want to segue into this article. So do you want me to take it, or do you want to?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. What happens, this is from Mediaite, what happens to Fox News viewers when they are paid to watch CNN? New study shows surprising results. Oh, for decades, political scientists have worked to document and detail the connection between partisan media consumption and voter behavior. A famed study from 2006, quote, The Fox News Effect, Media Bias and Voting, quantified how viewing Fox News helped Republicans gain some 0.3% of the popular vote between 96 and 2000. Now, 2 political scientists, David Brookman of Stanford and Joshua Kalla of Yale, have done a deep dive into understanding the specifics behind how partisan media can drive voter behavior. The researchers dropped a new term into the discussion and framed their thesis around looking beyond just the content and the bias delivered on cable news to argue that the choice of topics covered, quote, partisan coverage filtering, largely leads, quote, viewers to learn a biased set of facts. We distinguish between 2 mechanisms for media influence. We distinguish between 2 mechanisms for media influence. Prior research on traditional media has emphasized. I believe there was a colon supposed to be right there. Okay. The sentence didn't make sense. Sorry. So we distinguish between 2 mechanisms for media influence. Pause. Prior research on traditional media has emphasized agenda setting and framing, as well as a 3rd mechanism that has received less emphasis in the literature, but we argue is important for understanding partisan media, and that is partisan coverage filtering. The researchers write. Brockman explained the purpose behind the study on Twitter, noting, we have a lot of evidence partisan media affects vote choice, but we actually know little about why this might happen. What changes their beliefs, attitudes, or priorities might accompany these shifts in votes. So to answer the questions, they studied a group of regular Fox News viewers and paid a segment of them to watch CNN instead for 7 hours a week. Oh, man. You'd have to pay me a lot of money to watch CNN for 7 hours a week for all of September.
I would say I watch CNN probably about 7 hours a week.
What?
I do, as far as reading their articles, watching some of their videos, and watching their interactions.
I appreciate you falling on that sword for me because, man, I couldn't make it through 7 minutes a day.
But it helps to bring me back middle. I know it's a hard thing to say.
That's just we'll get to that in a second. Anyway, the 2 researchers ensured the treatment group actually watched CNN by giving them news quizzes. That's hilarious. The study's results were then found by comparing those news surveys against surveys of Fox News viewers who did not switch to CNN. Quote, compliance with watching CNN was high in the treatment group. The median participant correctly answered 14 of the 15 quiz questions we asked over the course of the 5 quizzes. The results of the study, quote, found manifold effects of changing the slant of their media diets on their factual beliefs, attitudes, perceptions of issues' importance, and overall political views. The treatment group that watched CNN changed their Attitudes from those who continued watching Fox News on a variety of issues from COVID-19, Donald Trump, Black Lives Matter, and even Fox News
I
itself.
love how they bold Donald
I did notice
Trump.
that. I was like, is that a link? That is not a link. But they really want you to know.
Well, they want you to know that if you
opinions
watch CNN, your views on Donald Trump will change.
Those who watch CNN were 5% more likely to believe in long COVID and 6% more likely to believe other countries did a better job combating CNN. Oh, okay. As compared to the viewers who continued watching Fox News. Additionally, the treatment group was 10% less likely to believe Biden supporters were happy when police officers got shot, and 11% less likely to agree that the president should focus more on stopping violent protests in the U.S. than controlling coronavirus. Treatment group was also 7% more supportive of mail-in voting than the control group that continued watching Fox News. Wow.
I know.
All right, and here's the little chart here. Can we see this all right? This is the frequency of subtopics. Let me see if I can make this
word count during incentivized period.
Yup. Wow. So it says, give viewers extensive information. Fox barely did. Instead, largely telling viewers COVID was no big deal.
Well, and here's the bigger takeaway here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Look at those two charts. And look at Trump's failure to protect the U.S. and his supporters from COVID-19. Fox covers it.
Yeah, looks like just shy of 2,500 words. And CNN's looks like just over 20,000 words.
So when you're talking media bias on something, and you know what? It's really funny that the way that they even do this is a media bias, because they're pointing out how CNN is so biased against Trump that it's swinging people back against him, while saying, well, we studied Fox News viewers. Because it's Fox News viewers that they paid to watch CNN, not CNN viewers that they paid to watch Fox.
I was honestly hoping when you sent me this article that it would go that route and we'd see exactly what the other side did. But of course they stopped there because we don't need anyone radicalizing any other way.
Well, so then you scroll down to the next.
Oh yes, I was gonna get to this in a second.
The next set of graphs.
It says our control group was still watching Fox and saw a completely different reality. According to Fox, Biden and Democrats were cheering on violent protests, supposedly ransacking American cities. Meanwhile, Dems were trying to steal elections with mail-in ballots. I'm just going to pause really quick here. And you can look at the framing of this, and you can honestly say all you have to do is replace Fox with CNN. Our control group was still watching CNN and saw a completely different reality, according to CNN, blah, 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 blah. It really does. They always think that these are gotcha situations when it really is just blowing up in their face and exposing the fact that, yes, CNN has literally been pushing propaganda down people's throats when they say Democrats were, according to Fox, Biden and Democrats were cheering on violent protests, supposedly ransacking American cities. All right, so yes, those violent George Floyd riots in the Summer of Love definitely ransacked and destroyed cities, and Kamala Harris's campaign, as well as a ton of other Democrats, bailed them out. They raised funds to bail out.
Okay, but we're not talking about. We're talking about the perception of the news here.
I understand that.
So
but
look at your graphs,
framed
though.
That way.
No,
yeah, go ahead about the graphs.
So look at your graphs. So you're looking at the top one: Trump failure to protect the U.S. and his supporters from COVID-19.
Yep.
Like we said, over 20,000 word counts during the CNN frequency. So you scroll down, and even though, think of the study. They were paid to watch CNN for 7 hours. They chose to watch Fox, right? So they're probably watching Fox for more than they're watching CNN.
Yeah, of course.
But yet, Biden Democrats' support for extreme racial ideology protests, look at the numbers on the bottom.
So it looks
15,000.
15,000. Oh, you're talking about Fox.
So they're trying to compare.
Say, on CNN, it shows for Biden and support for extreme racial ideology and protest, it looks like just shy of, what would you say? That's about, let's see, if that's 2,500, that's about, let's say 1.25 thousand. Whereas compared to Fox, in this case, like the other chart, it's over 15,000.
Well, so here's the thing.
Yep.
When you're looking at the top line for CNN, for Trump's failure to protect U.S., and you're looking at the top line for Fox for Biden Democrats' support of extreme racial ideology.
Yep.
Now you're saying, okay, yes, CNN pushed it over 20,000 times. Yes, Fox pushed it just over 15,000 times. That's a 25% discrepancy on how they're leaning one way or another. But they want you to believe that those charts are the same. That Fox is pushing their agenda just as much as CNN.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But look at the bottom numbers on the framework.
Yep, you're right.
So even this article and the way that they're displaying their information is a biased article about how we attribute different facts according to which news outlet we're watching.
And it is pathetic. It is. I mean, this is, again, I mean, it goes into a little more, but it just, at this point, it turns into, there's a reason why things like Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson were bolded, as Tucker Carlson's name is in bold a little bit further down the article. It's because, like you said, this in and of itself is trying its hardest to convince people, no. You see, they're biased and we're legit, while simultaneously showing on paper how biased they are.
Well, and they used this this study, and actually they had these two guys on with Brian Stelter the other day, and that's the one that I was listening to when you're like, why are you listening to Brian Stelter? Because he was talking to them about the study. And if you watch the video clip, and I got to remember to link it down below. No, because it is hilarious to watch him ask them questions that you're like, okay, if he was an attorney, somebody would stand up and say, you're leading the witness.
Oh, that's him nonstop. That's CNN. That's Fox News. That's propaganda 101. They never frame the questions in a way that will make whatever topic look the way they don't want it to look.
Because they don't think that people can think for themselves.
Well, of course not, because when you give people the opportunity to think for themselves, they get embarrassed, which brings us to the other half of this. I saw this, and I was like, oh, my God, you've got to see this. This is from the Daily Caller.
I know. This is that article, when you showed me that clip, was the reason that I dug deeper into the study when I saw it pop up.
So, how 2 questions from college kids derailed a big liberal disinformation conference. And I really just want to take a moment. If you can't see it, if you're listening to the podcast, there's literally a picture of Brian Stelter with a bunch of media stooges sitting under a giant banner that says disinformation and the erosion of democracy. I'm just going to pause on that image for just a moment.
But for some reason, it says April 6th through 8th. That must have been the date of the conference. But it really looks like disinformation and the erosion of democracy only happened between April 6th and 8th.
Oh, I don't take it that way. I take it as this. They are literally parading what they're going to do. So, from the article, some of the biggest names in left-wing politics had headlined a recent conference at the University of Chicago centered on, quote, disinformation. But it was 2 college freshmen who ended up stealing the show. The university hosted a disinformation and the erosion of democracy conference featuring big names like CNN's Brian Stelter, The Atlantic's Ann Applebaum, and Jeffrey Goldberg, and former President Barack Obama. What? He was in that picture?
And we still have never seen Brian Stelter in one of our relatives in the same room. So
I don't know, because I'm not a biologist. I don't know what a woman is. Anyways, the conference was largely partisan with the exception of the token conservative, Jonah Goldberg. I like the way they frame that. So, freshman Daniel Schmidt questioned the Atlantic's Ann Applebaum about Hunter Biden's laptop, to which the left-leaning journalist quickly dismissed the question. Quote, so in 2020 you wrote, those outside the Fox News bubble do not, of course, need to learn any of the stuff about Hunter Biden, referring to his laptop, of course, Schmidt began. A poll later found out that if voters knew about the contents of the laptop, 16% of Joe Biden voters would have acted differently. Of course, we know a few weeks ago the New York Times confirmed that content is real. Do you think the media acted inappropriately when they instantly dismissed Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation? And what can we learn from that in ensuring that what we label as disinformation is truly disinformation and not reality, he continued.
Yes.
Applebaum quickly moved to dismiss the legitimate question. My problem with Hunter Biden's laptop, I think, is totally irrelevant, she said. I mean, it's not whether it's disinformation or, I didn't think that Hunter Biden's business relationships have anything to do with who should be president of the United States. Oh, God. As I don't find it to be interesting, that would be my problem with that as a main news story. It's because news is defined by how interested this person is.
Ann Applebaum finds interesting.
Of course.
We should not report on anything that she finds disinteresting.
Disinformation, people.
And we should just label it as not true
label it as
versus label it as not interesting.
Wow. So Applebaum published a piece in 2020 that a cache of emails purportedly belonging to Hunter Biden's business partner, Bevan Cooney, was, quote, on the grand scale of misdeeds committed by politicians and their relatives, the kind of thing that barely registers. She alleged that the email story was a Republican effort to undermine Joe Biden's most important electoral asset, the impression shared by even those who don't like the former vice president that he is a fundamentally decent person. Well,
we're still not sure that he's a fundamentally decent person.
Oh, no. We definitely, those of us who know, we know the big guy. His time is coming. And his own party's turning against him. Well, we'll go from there. But anywho, she also claimed Fox News and other, quote, right-wing conspiracy bubble members will dip into the email caches to keep their followers focused on an alternate reality in which Joe Biden is a secret oligarch, his son is an important figure in the Chinese mafia, and lol, nothing matters. Aww.
Yeah.
Aww.
Yeah.
Well, let's go on. Freshman Christopher Phillips then asked CNN's Brian Stelter about his outlet's role in pushing disinformation, saying, quote, you've all spoken exclusively about Fox News being a purveyor of disinformation, but CNN's right up there with them. He noted how CNN pushed the Russian collusion hoax, they pushed the Jussie Smollett hoax, they smeared Justice Kavanaugh as a rapist, and they also smeared Nick Sandmann as a white supremacist, and yes, they dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop as pure Russian disinformation. I'm going to go ahead and take a note to let everybody know Nick Sandmann won that court case. CNN had to pay him a monster number, non-disclosed, but he has hinted that he got him good, and maybe why they're in the situation they find themselves in. However, continuing on, Stelter claimed Phillips was describing a different channel than the one I watch, but he understands it's a popular right-wing narrative about CNN.
Well, and he sat there and laughed.
Oh, he laughed, and he told a story about how in Ukraine, a Fox News cameraman had been hit by a bomb or something, and CNN ran over to help him because we're not enemies, we're friends.
Yes.
And he literally had nothing to do with it.
It had nothing to do with it. It didn't address any of the issues that, I mean, he could have said, well, with Jussie Smollett, we came out in support of him, and then new evidence came forward. He could have spun that any way he wanted. Russian collusion hoax, he could have said, we were reporting on what we had heard.
Yep.
He could have said we reached out to top FBI people for the laptop and were told that it was disinformation.
The benefit of the doubt. He responded in a way where he knew the kid was right, but it's just
that's what I'm saying. I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt. I'm saying he can't spin any of that.
Of course not.
Because
his handlers didn't tell him
because he knows that they did it on purpose.
True.
Because it's like when you catch your kid in a lie.
Yeah.
And they go on a different path and start talking about something completely unrelated to
try to distract and deflect. Oh no, I got you. It was 100%.
A big deflect, and then turning around and being and telling some story about how they're all working together. They're not.
Nope.
Because then he comes out with a study attacking Fox News and saying how prejudiced they are.
I mean, that's his entire thing. Brian Stelter, literally his entire show, quote, reliable sources, is nonstop just talking about how bad Fox News is. They're the worst. And if you're not listening to me, you're the worst too. Supposedly, with Jeff Zucker gone and all the controversy at CNN, not to mention their media platform crashing, their money gone, layoffs coming, there is a rumor that he's on the chopping block as well. And all we can hope is maybe with Jeff Zucker, who's a reality TV host, gone and them seemingly cleaning out the corruption, maybe they will come back to actually being news. But for now, as long as Brian Stelter is there, it is nothing but propaganda. And like you said, he is well aware.
Well, and the fact that the news outlets who have been accused of being corrupt are the ones coming out saying, well, we want to point out that there's disinformation in other news outlets. And then holding it at the University of Chicago. I mean, there are so many other places that the Dems can lean on. Yep. They keep going back to Chicago like it's a shining jewel.
At this point, I honestly think that the Uniparty, including the Democrats, are just one basically giant crime gang. And if you look at Chicago, it makes sense that that's DC. It makes sense that
Lori Lightfoot.
Thank you. That Lori Lightfoot is going right alongside him. In fact, I've seen some of her outfits. I actually saw a meme where she was in like a bowler cap and a trench coat, and it said, is the U.S. just slowly turning into Gotham City?
Yes, yes.
I mean, it's pathetic at this point. You're right.
See, but okay, it's like Cobblepot took control of.
It is. It's like
We
the
have
Dark
the
Knight Rises.
Penguin leading Chicago into the deep. No, it's horrible to watch these people. And who's voting for them?
That's the thing I don't know.
Who's
That's why
voting
I'm
for
wondering
this?
if we're waiting to go into a deep dive once all the information's released, but there was a big revelation in Arizona about having locked in the algorithm that switched votes and having the evidence to do it and all this stuff. I mean, if you pay attention to things going on, yeah,
There's a lot of deep dives that we need to do as far
Exactly.
as some of the campaign financing for AOC. We still need to look into.
no one cares about that.
Oh, I
There's
do.
Nothing will,
I
I
do.
know you do, and I know I do, but nothing will come of it. That's the problem. But you're
Oh.
right. There is a lot of stuff out there that's coming out. We gotta keep things moving, because I just realized what time it is. So
Yes.
I'm gonna touch on this lightly. This was an update to a story from last week about Elon Musk. He bought 9.2% of Twitter. He was offered a job on their
On the board. Yep.
He has declined that. He is not going to be doing it. It has led a lot of speculation that he is doing a pump it and dump it scheme with this. However, at the same time, this has given him a lot more power, because if he were on the board, there's a cap at how much you can buy, a cap on how much of a stake you can own. And by him declining that, he can continue to essentially take it over.
Well, and okay, so he's not on the board. Right. Like, he's a major influential voice out there. And now that he owns 9.2%, they can't censor him, right?
I wouldn't go too far. They're pretty crazy over there, and they've already come out and said, like we talked about before, oh, we don't actually need directors. We're the people. We're Twitter. These are people who work below, and it's like, yeah, nah. If those directors go, bye.
Well, and with all of the other stuff that Musk is doing right now, it might just be something that's not on his plate.
Well, he's a huge advocate of free speech. And the fact that he called the Babylon Bee CEO before he made this purchase, it shows that he is up to something, and I do feel that this will have a net positive outcome, even if it's just him buying enough Twitter to shut Twitter down.
Well, and you got to look at all of the stuff that he's doing lately. I'm really excited to see. I mean, the transport vehicles that he's talking about, the trucks that he's talking about, the AI that he's been talking about. I mean, there's a lot of moves at Tesla that I'm looking forward to in the next year or so.
Yep. There's not. Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything.
But yeah, being on the board meetings, I honestly think him declining it has more to do with the fact that he's got so much going on.
Yeah.
It might not be important to him.
I don't think so. I think there's more to it than that. But I love that Elon Musk is the kind of person where we can talk about this stuff and be like, I wonder what he's up to.
He's probably just high, hanging out.
He probably is.
Creating the next big tech jump for us.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, he probably is. However, like I said, he is a free speech advocate.
Yes.
And he has seen the censorship going on at Twitter. He might be saying, I don't want a board because I got all this money. I might just keep buying until I own so much that I can kick all you out and take over. I wouldn't put that past him. The guy is pretty much the troll of the generation. Now, we'll keep an eye on that. We'll see what happens with Mr. Musk as things develop.
But a little more lighthearted personal stuff.
Yes, end on a good note. So, we took our kids on Saturday to go see Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I'll go ahead and say we were debating doing a quick show where we just did a review of it, and we may still do that because, I'll come right out and say it. I grew up with Sega. I loved the Sonic games. I even watched the cartoons after school, and my 5-year-old boy has taken quite a liking to him too. Actually, I don't know why I'm singling him out because his 2 older sisters actually enjoy it too. So
well, they enjoy it, but they don't
get into
They don't
like
relive as the character.
No, they don't run around the house claiming that they are in fact Sonic the Hedgehog. Which reminds me, we got to get him on puberty blockers and insert him with Hedgehog DNA because clearly that's what he identifies as. Anywho.
No, but I do love it when we're outside and he runs Sonic fast.
Yes. Burn all that energy, kid. I know it's an unlimited amount, but maybe you'll run out. Anywho, the movie itself, if you enjoyed the first one, which was lighthearted, essentially a true PG movie, minimal swearing, slapstick humor, goofy stuff.
And it was one of the few times this in the last few years that we've seen Hollywood respond to critiques.
That's honestly one of the biggest reasons we saw it. For those who aren't aware, when the original trailer, I don't know how you could have missed this, when the original trailer was released for Sonic, the design of Sonic was nightmare-inducing. I don't quite know how to put it beyond that, but it was terrifying. And it was this huge pushback where everyone was like, we kind of want you to just kind of redo this. We're very supportive of this. We like Ben Schwartz as the voice, but this design is flawed. And for the first time, I mean, and this was epic, the director came out, and instead of saying, you're all a bunch of istophobes and we hate you and we're going to do it anyways because you're not true fans, he literally said, okay, we're going to push the movie back. We're going to redo the animation. We're going to listen. And hopefully you guys could turn out in January instead of, I think, October. Anyways, it came out in January. And so I said to Monica, I said, well, the new trailer came out, and it looks a lot better. It looks a lot more cartoony, but that's how it should.
It looked way more in line with how I remember Sonic looking in the cartoons. And unlike you, like, I played it, but I wasn't fully immersed. It wasn't one of those games that I was like, oh my gosh, yes, like my Final Fantasy games, like I would get into for hours.
Absolutely.
Sonic was never that, but it was a great one where, like, when you're hanging out with friends, it's one that everybody recognizes and the one that you can kind of play together.
I mean, it's the face of Sega. Everyone knows who Sonic the Hedgehog is, even through name. Even if they're just like, oh yeah, that's that dude from a video game or something.
It's a blue guy. Yep.
Exactly, it's the blue guy. They know who it is. So we went, we saw it, it was cute. Of course, the kids loved it because it was a kids' movie. However, there was a very odd response, in addition to the original odd response by the director, which was, hey, I'll take what you guys say and we'll make it better. And then the fans were like, fantastic, we support it. It honestly became, I think it was the top grossing video game movie of all time, which is, video game movies, they're very hit or miss, and most of the time when they hit, you kind of still got to take it.
And most of the time they end up being guilty pleasures.
Exactly. I'll watch the original Mortal Kombat any day. But anyways, so...
And Super Mario Brothers is always my downfall. I know that you are not as big of a fan.
I'll watch that one. I just prefer not to be sober. Anyways, I started to notice something happening leading up to this movie. There actually had appeared to be a smear campaign running. Like Rotten Tomatoes, the score aggregate for critics were, I think it topped out at like 67 or 68%. Like they were really going after this movie, and it didn't make any sense. Like, why would there be a movement against this? Looking into it more, it was Hollywood. Hollywood was ticked that a director actually came out and said, I'll listen to the fans, you guys know what you're talking about, and then was rewarded. So with the sequel coming out, they started just putting out all these hit pieces. Well, we saw the movie, and I mean, very much like the first one. Good kids movie, entertaining, a little, probably about a half hour, 20 minutes longer than it needed to be, but that was just if that's the worst critique I have, who cares, The kids loved it, all this good stuff. However, alongside this, Jim Carrey made the announcement that he wasn't going to do... He was basically retiring from acting.
And I think he made that announcement April 1st, right?
Well, technically, I did look into that. The announcement went public April 1st. He made it March 31st.
Okay.
It went public April 1st, but everyone thought it was an April Fool's joke.
Yep.
We have company.
Well,
Yes. Yes, 1 second. 1 second. Yes. Okay, we're going to wrap this up really quick here.
Well, so coming soon, we'll go ahead and do our review of Sonic.
Review. We'll cover all this then.
Too.
So, yes, we have Unexpected Company, so we're going to wrap it up there. As always, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Here's the icon. It is
and
beautiful.
We will see you next time.
We will see you. We will do a video about Sonic, and then we'll cover all this. So, everybody have a great one.